So we can get started. So thanks for coming, everybody, and welcome to Buffalo Startup Week. We're one of, I think, 4 initial events today on Monday. So this is the first event of the week of the People Track. So this week, specific to the People Track, we'll be bringing you programming on all things people and kind of HR related for your startup, or really a lot of the concepts apply to any business. So today we're starting off the discussion with a panel discussion on recruiting and selection, which is probably one of the most highly publicized area of HR and people in businesses right now. But we really will be rounding out this discussion through the rest of the week on all things people with a discussion on talent strategy tomorrow. So a lot of the upfront work you might do before you go out there and try to recruit and select people and identifying who those people need to be. And then some speakers on diversity and inclusion, talent and leadership, and then some HR compliance basics for startups at the end of the week. So we encourage you to sign up for those if you have not yet. And you can find all that through the same link that you registered for this on. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and introduce the panelists today. They're joining us really quick. So first we have Claire Petrie. So Claire is currently the Director of Technology and Talent Management at Lighthouse Technology Services. She's also the President of Claire Petrie HR and Training LLC. She's used LinkedIn, Twitter, and networking to build her personal brand and uncover new opportunities for herself and the company she's worked for. Claire has kind of broken the LinkedIn algorithm for both personal and company branding. So she's going to offer a really unique perspective today on all that. And she's also the member of several human resource boards and leaders in those groups. And she also serves on the University of Buffalo's Young Alumni Leadership Council. So thanks, Claire, for joining us. Next, we have Sarah Vienna. Sarah is a dynamic leader and energized by challenge with over 20 years of progressive human resource management experience. She has the proven ability to identify, develop, and execute business initiatives while also prioritizing the needs and opportunity to positively impact each individual employee. And she does this in her organization every day today. She also has a passion for supporting others to achieve their best, and unlocking individuals' potential has led her to formally pursue coaching, which her and I had a conversation about a few weeks ago, and that's amazing. And after an 18-month intensive certification training, plus over 100 hours of coaching experience, she has achieved her designation of Associate Certified Coach recently by the International Coaching Federation. So thanks for joining us, Sarah. Next, we have Quintessence Anks. Quintessence is currently a DevOps advocate at PagerDuty, where she brings over a decade of experience breaking and fixing things in IT. As an advocate, she uses her past experience and knowledge to build relevant content for other IT professionals to learn and grow. Outside of work, she mentors underrepresented groups to help them start sustainable careers in technology. So Quinn will definitely have kind of a different perspective from the non-employer side in today's discussion. And interesting fact, she has a cat and a saltwater aquarium at home. That's pretty cool. And then last but not least, we have Joel Shapiro, and just winging Joe's bio. Joel is, he has recently, I think most excitingly about Joel, started Quell, which is kind of an online freelancer platform for recruiters. So it helps connect recruiters and companies who might need recruiting help but don't want to hire in-house or don't want to go the traditional recruiter route, and helping them fill roles. And he's also the president of JMS Technical Solutions, Inc., which is a national boutique IT staffing firm. So thanks, Joel, for joining us, and hopefully I did a good job ad-libbing that. All right, so we will get started here on the discussion because I know we have a lot of ground to cover. So where we want to start, or where I thought it might be appropriate to start, is talking about recruiting in 2021 going into 2022, because it's certainly different than it's been. So there's been a lot of media coverage this year, certainly on employers and recruiting, and what it takes to kind of get people to join companies and firms, and with wages and turnover and the turnover tidal wave that's been out there. So when it comes to hiring trends, what have you guys really seen as, real life observations this year? And which ones do you think are actually, valid and true, and not just kind of media hype out there? So Joel, we'll start with you on this one, because I think you have have both perspectives.
Yeah, well, it's definitely getting a lot of attention, a lot of noise, right? The Great Resignation, read some crazy stat, like 90% of people are considering, changing jobs, right? And look, are open to new opportunities. So it is, there's a lot of truth to the media buzz. I have been doing staffing, technology staffing since like 2002, and this is the craziest I've seen it. So I missed the whole .com. I came a little bit after the whole .com. So I don't know if it compares, but for sure this is um, I think the craziest I've seen it. Um, some of the let's see, like that's if you dig down a little bit into the hype, that's true. Um, is yeah, there are a lot of people that are open to finding a new job, and my view is you can look at it two ways. You can look at it, it's hard, it's going to be hard to hire people, or you can look at it as an opportunity that
Yeah.
you can hire people you can have hired 6 months ago because people are listening and they're open to change and they want to hear, what's out there. So it's hard, yes, but it's also one of the best times I think to hire as well. But you got to be ready. I'm sure we'll talk about all that.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a good point though. Yeah, people are more open than ever, I would think too.
Yeah, can I chime in on that, Emily?
Sure. Yeah.
I was actually going to go like the turnover route as well. I attended an interesting Twitter chat a week or so ago with HR Social Hour, and they called it the Great Reprioritization instead of resignation because we didn't like that term. But yeah, really just due to the pandemic, people's priorities have come to light, what type of work environment and companies and roles they want to do and things like that. So yeah, from my technology perspective as well, a lot of my clients, when they lose someone because of this reprioritization, they're trying to backfill the same exact person with the same exact years of experience. So I think now is also a time as well where we have to be more creative. And I am seeing more companies ramp up their internal development programs or hiring from the Western New York Tech Skills Initiative or things like that. So that's something I hope we continue to see more of as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, whether it's recruiting strategy or, other strategies to retain or develop from within or consider a different type of person. And the talk on talent strategy tomorrow will cover a lot of that too, to round out this discussion. All right, great. Well, we are short on time, so we will move on to the next question. So with many companies now offering remote work, and that's obviously been a huge trend that I think we all thought was going to be temporary and seems like it's going to be permanent, that previously didn't, as well as a shortage of talent, like we just discussed, and considering different options. We're seeing a greater nationwide emphasis, certainly, on the value of a diverse workforce and considering kind of outside options. So are you seeing a tangible change in the way companies target and seek out alternative members of the talent pool? Are you seeing them being more open-minded? And how are companies best doing this? So we'll start with Quinn on this question.
I have thoughts.
Yeah.
I feel like what I've been seeing is, at least in my experience on the potential, we'll say, employee side, right, where things are hitting me in the same avenues that they've always been hitting, which the noise is louder. And this ties into the perception of this great resignation, panic kind of thing. But realistically, when we're talking about actually prioritizing underrepresented groups in a way that's tangible, instead of me sitting here with company A, that is my company, and I just really wish we had more of checkboxes. And then I wait for them to come to me, or I spam their LinkedIn, email, or whatever data I have, and sit here and I'm just like, I guess they just don't want to be here. Right? I guess they just don't want to be here. But that's not necessarily actually the case. And I know I'm broad stroking a little bit for the sake of brevity, but if you're not active in a community that you're trying to build a bridge to, because when we're talking about underrepresented, these are not communities that are in general on level footing with everybody else. So kind of expecting the same engagement, whereas if I was reached out to with my demographics versus, pick someone who's on this call was reached out to from their demographics, we won't respond in the same way, or we won't think or assess the same things. And so what really, in my opinion, needs to happen with this diversification and remote work and everything is you actually need to have some sort of activity, olive branch style, that has a consistent learned behavioral pattern that shows that people can respond to your overtures in a way that is positive without it being like, oh, great, I need a job for the reasons we all need jobs, but oh, you're going to burn me, right? Through your ignorance or whatever, right? So
You
like
have-
you need to actually be active in those communities.
Do you have an example, Quinn, of a company you've seen that is doing this well, either locally or, nationally? Doing it?
Well is hard. I'll say, so my parent company doesn't do terrible. So when they do things, the bar is low. I see you laughing, like the bar is low. Okay. So there's what I would like to see in my head and what I actually can see and what is reasonable to expect. And one of the things that PagerDuty did before I joined actually a few years ago was they did an investigation and went across all the demographics in the company. PagerDuty has about 1,000 employees. They work in the tech industry. And they were basically looking for the pay gaps based on demographic, gender gaps, and racial gaps, and so forth. And then they leveled out all the pay gaps so that it really was closer to a meritocracy than maybe would have happened at first glance. And like things like that. And they were very public about it. So like I can talk about that because they published a thing that they did this.
Right.
Having visible initiatives like that is very helpful because if you're a person who's trying to see what you can expect from this company that you don't really know yet, you're interviewing with them, that helps give an outsider data for what that means. Doing initiatives like that or having salary surveys or showing activity that is not just nominal in a group is also really helpful. I know that as a woman and I know that I'm white, but even I like will skim the leadership. So like sometimes you'll see like diversity and there's a lot of diversity at the individual contributor level.
Sure.
And you'll see that decrease steadily and rapidly up the pyramid. And so like it helps to skim as well because you can see how high up or how far down or whatever that initiative is penetrating. And people do this, right? So if you're looking at how it can help, making sure that you're prioritizing diversity early also helps.
Yeah.
I can keep talking about this, so I don't want to like chew up all of our time because I have like lots of thoughts on this. But like, if you think about it, even a startup, you have a startup, limited budget, needs a certain number of people, needs to do things quickly, only the heroes or whatever. And so they hire everyone they know. And everyone they know probably is very similar to them. So you have maybe a white dude with 5 other white dudes. But now you've saturated the experience layer. And when you don't have employee mobility, which is something that maybe starts to get a little far from this question, but when you don't have mobility within a company, mobility is a hard problem to solve, to know what role could easily leapfrog into other roles in a company, then you get retention problems,
Sure.
migration problems, but you also have people who can only get promoted by job hopping, which is very common the more underrepresented you are.
Yeah. So on that point, I mean, that sounds like, I think, a mistake or just maybe an oversight that a lot of companies have probably realized that they have been making up until this point, and only with this recent pressure point have they had been kind of forced to confront that. Kind of a tangent into the next question, what are some other mistakes that you see companies making in 2021, maybe that they've been making all along, but specifically this year? And we can take this to maybe Sarah, because I think you had something to contribute to the last topic. What are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing companies make?
Specific to recruiting is, companies not understanding the market is so passive when it comes to candidates. And so I've seen, a lot of companies continue to rely on just, the old try and true. I'm going to put out a posting and I'm going to get all these resumes and I'm going to look at it. And that's really not generating the pipeline that many of us would like to see. So I think, the opportunity is really to showcase who you are as a company and why would somebody want to come work for you, because that's how you attract the right candidates and how you get them to talk to you, because we're all on the different medias and seeing like what are you active on, what really stands out about your culture, why would I want to work for you versus where I'm at. And so I think it's really important for companies, regardless of the size, to really understand what a passive market looks like with candidates and how we need to be so proactive and not put a pause on postings and outreach, because we're kind of recruiting all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And Claire, I know you work a lot in that space, and that's kind of like your specialty, branding, whether it's the candidate or the company. So do you have anything to add there in terms of mistakes you're seeing?
Yeah. Oh, not from the branding perspective, though. That'll come up sometime later. The first thing that came to mind when I heard you say this one was for my clients, like having more than 2 rounds of interviews. So managers still hiring from a place of fear in a lot of cases. They just don't feel empowered to make good decisions. So they're still asking us to check references or do these things that make no sense when I need to help them craft better interview questions so they feel more confident and they can move faster and be more decisive. So I also try to help them decide up front too, who's going to be on your team. Are they free to interview? How quickly are we going to get this done? Because to Sarah's point, everyone is looking around. They got a lot of choices. I think Joel said that as well. So that's what came to mind when you said that. So I think we have a lot of work as TA partners to continue to help our clients and hiring managers feel more empowered to make good decisions faster.
Yeah. And that's great because a lot of the mistakes we're talking about are definitely questions we're going to hit on later. But yeah, I agree. All those things are mistakes I see my clients make as well. And that it's very, sensitive hand holding to walk them through and try to get them to do things differently. So well, kind of taking a pivot here before we get back to some of that stuff. Data is everywhere now, and we're in Startup Week, and probably a lot of the startups that are on this presentation or will be, participating in Startup Week certainly are data based and tech based. And kind of the HR world isn't new to the concept of data, but certainly, there aren't a lot of companies using it or using it well or fully utilizing those platforms to gather and use data. So, my first question, especially not to actually drive, value from that data, right? So there's a ton of helpful tools out there in the recruiting space, in the people management space, but specifically talking about recruiting and selection today. So with a million, applicant tracking systems and job boards out there and different social media, integrations with LinkedIn and Facebook having its own job page now, they're all trying to take your money. They're all trying to get you to post your jobs there. Do you have a tool or system that you've used or that you do use that you found to be most valuable and why? So we're going to start with Sarah here, because as an internal, recruiter, I think you might have some insight here.
Yeah, and we use we do use the LinkedIn recruiter source, which has turned out to be a good investment for us, just given the type of candidate that we're looking for. And I feel like if you're going to be hiring a few people a year, you're able to take things into your own hands to really start to source them. I found that to be very beneficial, but also the networking and opportunity with employee referrals. Wanting to Quinn's point of, diversify your workforce still, but also not underestimate who your people know and what circles they go in and how their reach or how far their reach goes as well. So we do employee referrals, we use LinkedIn, we use our other sources with universities of understanding, whether alumni bases or entry level as well, hiring people from our internship program. So we keep it broad.
Sure. Joel, I don't know if you have something to contribute here, because I know you're kind of on the technical side.
Yeah, I could chime in there. You're right. There's many tools, everything's out there and everybody's findable kind of now, online. So that's an advantage. But one thing I see, especially a lot of startups, is missing is having some sort of applicant tracking system. It could be anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be expensive or complex, because a lot of startups, they're posting on Indeed, or they're buying a LinkedIn job, or they're doing this and that, but then it sits in somebody's inbox and there's no place. They're not collecting the data that, even though those candidates might not be useful now or today, they might be useful in 3-6, or relevant for their positions, right? Down the line. So that's one thing we really advise, especially startups or smaller companies that we're working with, that you want to make sure you're not losing these candidates, and you could keep them engaged, right, even if they're not a good fit now, and it could be you could get value out of that later on. So that's one thing I think every startup should have.
Yeah, I come across a lot of small businesses too, where, I mean, everyone's posting on Indeed. I think that's probably like the most ubiquitous place to post jobs now, and probably you get the most bang for your buck potentially there, I would argue. But yeah, you just get resumes sent to your inbox, and then you have resumes everywhere. And it's harder to keep track of who you've contacted in stages. So an applicant tracking system, which most payroll providers that you're using anyway have an add-on. I think that's a great suggestion. So kind of jumping off that point, whether you're using a system or not, do any of you have experience in using data to really help drive future recruiting decisions? And Sarah, I think we'll start with you here again, but whether it's time to fill positions or tracking which sources that to post on are leading to more hires or more quality hires. Have you used data at all? I don't come across a lot of companies using data in a really valuable way. So curious what you guys have done here.
Yeah, it's been helpful, to Jill's point of creating that pipeline, because, oftentimes we meet a lot of individuals as they're starting out in their career, still in university, and they don't all join us, or we haven't provided an opportunity for them. So to have that pipeline to stay in contact with them, 3-5 years down the line, that's where I've seen a lot of value. It also helps us with the sourcing. We do track sourcing. So are we finding them through an employee referral, or are they coming to our site and we're seeing that that's being driven off of social media versus our initiation of an outreach through LinkedIn. So I found it to be helpful to help quantify, our investments and where we're putting those dollars going forward as a business to recruit.
Yeah.
And also, creating that clarity of keeping things in-house versus, going externally to hire. So that's been helpful for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that everyone sees HR or people operations of any type, whether it's specifically recruiting, as like a cost center. And, you could use data, yes, to identify where those dollars could be the most bang for their buck later, but very few people are taking that step. So that's a great point.
Yeah. And I would also say too, you get good competitive data that you're starting to, hold in there as well around like compensation expectations, et cetera. So even if you don't pursue someone and you've had an initial screening, you start to understand the market and market conditions. So there's a lot of value to have a central, area to capture all of those notes and understanding.
Sure, absolutely. Anyone else using data out there with clients or internally?
I'll just say we have a pretty robust system that we built out to evaluate our customers, our clients, and decide where, limited size, right? Where can we put our attention to? So we track everything from, time to hire, how many, everything, how many candidates are the interviewing. We'll share the data with them too to help them. But it also helps us decide, okay, we have a 72% chance of making a placement with this from our traditional staffing model business. We'll use that to evaluate our customers and where we're going to work and put our attention.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think maybe, companies internally in the recruiting could borrow some tips from recruiting firms, as much as they hate them and forking over that fee. There's some stuff to learn from you guys. Great. All right, well, let's pivot again into employer branding. So branding is everywhere, right? I think everyone's dog has its own personal brand and Instagram profile now, and certainly companies do. And, a lot of companies, whether it's getting involved in, political or social discussions, that's certainly an extreme end, but can benefit from this or be hurt by it. And then that includes also their employer brand that they're building out, right? So I guess to start out, and this, Claire, I think this is kind of your, jam session area. What is branding when it comes to employer branding? And how does a company go about crafting and articulating their brand and making it well known to the people that it needs to get out to?
Oh, I feel like Quinn with this one. I have so many thoughts. I'm gonna try to keep it short. So yeah, I'm not like a marketing expert by any means. I have an HR background. So I've always approached like my employer brands the same way I do my personal brand. And it's just, what do people think of me when they see my name and my headshot? So for my company, it's what do they think when it's the name and the logo? And sorry, my dog's chewing a bone. I've been trying to stay on mute. So what keywords come to mind? So even for like Taco Bell, it could be bold, fun, whatever. And you build your brand through your behavior, both online and offline. And I talk to candidates a lot about that too, who are trying to build their personal brand, but then they're leaving nasty comments on LinkedIn posts, venting and things like that. So yeah, you build your brand through your behavior. And I think if your company values really are true to your organization, which I think especially during these times of COVID, it's a really good time to look at your mission and vision and values, and do they still apply? And I don't know, how are employees still living those out and things. But if that is the case, then how is your team like behaving in accordance to those online? So what I call how you connect, post, and engage intentionally. So yeah, for me, in my experience, that people focused content gets that word out most. So of course, it's important to post about your products and your job openings, but also what you're doing kind of as a person. What are you involved with in the community, spotlighting your employees, things like that. So I wanted to like shout out Joel's point earlier with the ATS, like, yes, get that in place first. And then in my opinion, move on to those like more value added activities, like getting your team involved with then posting those job posting links that drive people back to the ATS, getting them out to their networks, like Sarah mentioned. And yeah, that like networking and I think getting out there and actually talking to people can be so much more valuable than like, yeah, researching the next job board and things like that. So yeah, I'll try to keep it short so other folks can chime in.
Well, do you have, and kind of was going to put this on to Quinn too, because I know I know Quinn, you help others and kind of exploring opportunities and getting connected as well. From your guys' experience, or, you know, anyone else can chime in where they maybe have a horror story, but is there any one place that candidates are looking more than others to find this data? Like, I know there's Glassdoor and there's reviews on there, but I don't know how credible the general population believes that is. And, you know, people just like to dump complaints there. Is it looking at LinkedIn? Is it looking at their company website? Where are people looking, and how, like, if you had to choose a couple places to put value, you know, and time into, what would you suggest that be?
Oh my God, there's so much. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I'll go first just because I think mine's really short. So I'm really interested in your answer. Like for us, like our just Google like for business page is like where we get our reviews. And we've had a lot of people bring up when they talk to us that they have checked those and asked us specific questions about them. So for us, that's been the main thing that we like focus on, I think, and that our clients and candidates look at.
All right, Quinn, have at it.
It's hang on, I have a prop. For exactly this scenario.
What is that?
It's a happy dumpster fire. So
I thought it was a sushi bento box, but I'm having sushi.
I mean, it's the same type of, what do they call those, pop figurines or whatever. So I could see it. So it gets difficult because one of the things that is really beneficial is to have a single source of truth for things, right? And you don't want to have so much single sources that you get monopolies or anything, but at the same time, when you're trying to walk people through finding positions and they're checking 6, I've been thinking about this while everyone's been answer the last few questions, because it all comes down to, oh, we're pulling out data of this platform and this works best for us and whatever. Right. I'm sure that's true. We all in every industry are going to be choosing tools that fit our business use case and et cetera. But then when you have a proliferation of tools, you have on the employee side to, you know, it's a many to one problem, or one to many problem, I guess, where now I, as a prospective employer or coaching a prospective employer, checking a litany of places. I usually actually try and encourage people to network, to be honest with you. Part of that is to reduce that one to many problem, because instead of passively looking at Glassdoor or whomever, LinkedIn, you're actually talking to somebody, hopefully, who's at the company. So first of all, you can vet out for yourself and think of what questions you want to ask them, just in chatter about how you want to vet out that company. But also, whether they have a referral program or not, they can tell you where to apply. Like, right. You don't have to hunt this company down. They can just tell you, oh, it's on our website. I know that when I'm job hunting, I usually try to have an idea of mind of what I want. And this probably goes into the branding problem. I start looking for companies that in my head are already associated with that brand, because interviewing is arduous. I'm at a level in my career where I usually go about 3 to 5, depending on the company, interview rounds for the past few jobs that I've had, right? So like that takes month and a half, depending on how quickly you're moving through those. It's a while, and I'm doing multiple at the same time, the same for any other candidate. So like shrinking that down as much as possible is really helpful.
So on that note, Quinn, what would you suggest that companies can do? Or, you were talking about what you look for, maybe what, the people that you help connect with jobs look for. What could you put in a job posting or, build into your brand, whether it's on LinkedIn or on your own job, board or landing page on your website that kind of sends some of those same signals, like employee testimonials?
So employee testimonials, yes, but like those are always going to be skewed for the positive. So this isn't to say that they're useless. It's that they have a context. And so reading them is helpful within that context. When we're talking about things that employers can do with their brand, I think it's important to kind of disconnect what the company wants to be branded as a company and what it wants to be branded as an employer. And I'm going to pick on, I think it was Claire's example earlier about Taco Bell, right? I don't remember the 2 words you chose, but they were like,
I think I said bold and
bold and something. Right. But as an employee, I care less about that branding and more about like your employer branding. And do you have a reputation for treating people well or poorly or in the middle somewhere or whatever? And so when you're thinking about your branding and when you're thinking about your job requisition, calling things out that are very specific can really help you. So if we're going to keep going on Taco Bell, why not? If Taco Bell has a job rec for an IT professional, because we're all digital companies, and they, did this is what our tech stack looks like. So this is the technical requirements. And then when they get into the what we're like and what we're offering you phase, you have very specific language around what you do for payment, what you do for additional benefits, what you do for time off, what you do in the event of sick leave for the COVID or whatever. But what also helps is having very specific language around what's optional versus required, because different groups are disproportionately impacted on how hard a requirement is. And so if you say you must have 5 years experience in pick something, and that's not actually true. I once had a conversation with a prior employer who had a bachelor's degree as a requirement for a technical writing position.
Mhm.
I asked them what for. They said to prove that they can write. I said, we have them submit a writing sample. Are we not doing that anymore? They said, yes. I said, which degree do we need? And they said, any degree. And I'm like, if we have the requirement of any degree, we do not know why the degree matters.
Mhm.
Why is it there?
Yeah.
Right. And so when we go back to those, what should you put on the rec? Don't put things that don't actually impact the job on the rec, because then you're cutting out population for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's important to remember that the job posting is an advertisement. And that's something I come across with clients too, is like they just copy and paste from a job description. And that's all it's on there. There's nothing about the company that gives anyone any insight of what it's like to work there or like would make them want to work there for any different way. So, just spending some more time creating an advertisement that's very different from a job description. I think it's a great
Right.
tip. Yeah.
And who's actually right putting the job description together? I know we have customers and they'll just take a templated one that they've used for years and maybe change it a little bit. It's like, then when we get on the phone, we kind of pull out, right? What are the key things here? And lots of times we'll just make our own for them because
Right.
it's not exactly accurate.
And I think sometimes people don't think them through too. Maybe that's your experience as well, where they're like, they probably just put the bachelor's degree. I remember when I was working in technical support and it had a bachelor's degree requirement on there. I mean, I had one, so it didn't impact me, but when I thought about it, I didn't need my degree to be doing the job I was doing. It didn't,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great point.
And one thing just to add on, Quinn made a great point to reach out to people on LinkedIn that work there instead of just, kind of going to the Glassdoor and the other ones where it is like skewed. I also like to suggest reaching out to people that used to work there that are no longer there, right? And trying to get the real deal of what's going on specifically, maybe that person had that similar role in the past. Try to connect with them and chat with them because you'll get a lot of insight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think,
to
go ahead.
back off of that really quick. I know when I mentor, I will sometimes do that on behalf of my mentees if I have a connection they maybe don't yet. Like, hey, you recently left this position and I happen to know you. Like, did you just want a different opportunity? Or is there something I should know for the person I'm coaching? Right. Right. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the power of that network. And I think the takeaway, because this is geared toward what can startup founders do or people leading startups to, find and recruit great talent, is understand that how you treat every employee may affect the future talent you get. Because if one of those people that you didn't treat well or leaves with a bad taste in their mouth or bad impression, is one of those people that a future candidate reaches out to, then there goes your chance at hiring those people. So I think that's a great takeaway. All right. Well, kind of going from there into sourcing. So, I think, the days where we can just post, even if you craft a great job posting, right, an advertisement versus a job description. I mean, I think that's a great first step in making yourself attractive. But I think waiting for people to apply now is probably a mistake. And certainly, with how competitive things are, like you were saying, Joel, it's great in some ways and not in others, but you definitely have to be reaching out, and potentially more people are open to the discussion too. So starting here, I think we'll start with Joel on this one. Kim, haven't heard from you in a while, but where do you think, just a quick takeaway, bang for your buck thing, like where should people be posting or sharing their job posting that they put together that's not a job description? If nowhere else, where should they be doing that?
Yeah, well, yeah, we call it like post and hope, post and pray, whatever, and you could still, you get lucky, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Post it everywhere, you can, right? Put it out there, spread the word, have your, like I think Claire mentioned, have your employees and teammates share it, whether it's LinkedIn is still, I think, the most powerful, or even if it's posted somewhere else, still share it on LinkedIn. But one mistake I see some of our, even our customers mention is that even when they post a job and they get applicants, they might just like email them like, hey, we'd like to schedule something, right? I suggest, kind of picking up the phone, make sure you're calling them and getting them in, because we've heard several times from clients like, oh, that person applied and I sent them an email and just never heard back. It's like, you gotta, in this market, especially, you gotta cut through the noise. And so wherever you post, and LinkedIn, I guess, is probably still the place, the most impactful. But wherever you do, just make sure you're following up, with the candidates, not just like an email.
I totally agree. Yeah. Waste of time in an email. Sarah, do you have any hacks for that? Where do you find that you get the most bang for your buck, whether it's posting or a network that you listed on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot about the personal outreach. I think of, especially, through the eyes of a startup, if you have the ability to reach out and put on that personal touch, because a lot of the larger organizations or global organizations have stuff so automated that it feels impersonal. And I think that's where that opportunity for the smaller businesses, if you can mobilize your team to do a personal outreach, that means a ton to a candidate versus just having something automated. So I think LinkedIn is still where it's at as far as like the depth of the reach that you could have. But then it's, how are you doing that? How are your people involved in it? How are your people out there talking about what they do and why they continue to do that with your company, and the more you can get their stories out there, or them just showing they're actively engaged, I feel like that makes a big difference of candidates being interested, because they know it's not just stale, like, company posts out there. It's really people that are working there that are engaged in what they're doing.
Yeah, and maybe even having them, and I'm sure Claire, you would echo this, having them share it on their own personal medias, not just posting it on the company's thread, because then that builds out from there into their networks, and who knows who's looking in their network.
And we did that too, where we met with our group in smaller groups based on what their needs are. And said, you're part of that brand that's out there. So we can do things in HR for the firm to get information out there, but we need all of you. So we do need you to like it, share it. And this is how, you talk about data. This is how that ripple effect takes place. And also asking them, like, what story would you share? If you're going to talk to someone, or someone called you, because they might call you blindly and say, hey, do you like where you're working? To the examples used before, what would you say? And start to think about that, and getting them more active in the market, of not just thinking about the work that they do, but they're all a conduit to who we're attracting from a talent standpoint.
Sure. And all that's free compared to, the insane that some of the job boards are charging and things. And fees that a recruiter would charge, which brings us into our next topic, which is, I think recruiters are probably having the best 2 years, maybe, well, after people were hiring again, maybe the best year, this past year of their business in some ways, as people need more help than ever in helping to find talent. So I've personally have had mixed experiences with using recruiters over the years. God knows there's a ton of them. It's hard to filter out the good and the bad, and who's really going to help you find a great fit person, and who's just, I like to call them meat merchants, just trying to place people in roles to collect their 20% fee, right? Or God, it's probably more than that now. So Joel, this one's coming to you, but how can the startup determine when it makes more sense to outsource that talent versus like maybe considering hiring a recruiter to starting to do their recruiting, and how do they make those decisions?
Yeah, that's great. Definitely a lot there. So a few thoughts on that one. So, well, one, like when should a startup look to bring it in-house, right, versus outsource? It depends. So it just depends how many people they're looking to hire in the coming year, right? Like now's a good time to think about that coming into, towards the end of the year, right? Is it 20, 30 roles? When does it make sense? I would think somewhere around there, right? If they're looking to grow by 30 or so people, right? Maybe you want to bring an in-house recruiter, but also are they, growing all technical positions or sales or all different things, right? Because I think a technical recruiter is a little different skill set than some other maybe corporate positions or finance. They're all kind of different skill sets, and the recruiters have different networks of candidates. So that's exactly why we started Quell, to help companies connect with gig recruiters that have the network of candidates on demand that are, they're vetted recruiters to be on the platform. So there are many, many good staffing agencies.
Yeah.
JMS is a great one, but and Lighthouse and all, there's many other good ones, but I think you're right. Like there's a lot of, kind of going for the fee. And if there's a candidate that's maybe like borderline, right? Maybe you submit them to the client because our competitors might also, right? So the reason why we started Quell was also to align interests better with companies looking to hire and the recruiter that they work with, and almost cutting us out. So there's no fee, it's a weekly, you work with a recruiter on a weekly basis and you're paying them directly. So recruiter gets more money, and staffing agency doesn't get the 25%, fee. So that's, that was some of the thought process going in there to how to make the relationship better between company and outsourced recruiter.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that there are many less traditional models out there now, whether it's Quell or, I certainly partner with my clients as an outsourced HR firm to help empower them to better hire on their own, right? Like maybe you just need some coaching on how to post a better job and recruit better. So I think that's a good point. So my next question is, and Joel, maybe you're a good person, or Sarah, since I'm sure you've made this decision several times when you need help too. But if you decide to go and outsource to a recruiting agency, or maybe consider Quell or some other partnership or alliance with someone to help you find talent, how do you determine who's good, who's bad? Like, what are some quick tips you could provide with startups who are probably, desperate at times and easy to be taken advantage of, to separate, who's going to help them from who's going to take advantage of them?
I can add. I think it's understanding what their process is with the candidates. I think where I've been most impressed is when, an outsourced recruiting agency or recruiter really takes the time to understand why the candidate is making a change and why they feel they would be a good match with us. You described it, Emily, and in a couple of different scenarios, and it's so true. You have some that are just sending you names and hoping it sticks, and they don't even know this person. You know more about them because you've done more research on LinkedIn about them than the recruiter did, and you're signing a check for 25%, 30%. So I think really understanding their process and how invested they are to work with you to find a good fit, so that you're really getting the return on the dollars that you're paying.
Yeah, and maybe knowing what you should be expecting from them too. And, and Joel, I don't know, and probably you, Claire, could probably provide some real information on what you should expect from someone helping you with that.
Yeah, I'll just say real quickly, it's also like two-way, right? So you should have expectations of the agency, but agencies should also have expectations with the customer and set that up to set up a good partnership. Our best clients for JMS are the ones that are very engaged in the process, very open to feedback, and it's a really like we are like an embedded part of their team, right? And that's when it works the best. If you're just kind of hoping to have somebody else do it, not think about it, probably set up to fail a little bit.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure Claire has thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in real quick too to echo what you said, Joel. Like at the end of the day, your recruiting partner is like an extension of your brand in the market. So yeah, like at Lighthouse, we're a small team of 5. We call ourselves technology talent managers. That's why when you read my title, Emily, people sometimes look at me like, because we all recruit, we all have relationships with clients, we all do marketing, we all do system stuff. But it works out well because when we do go to partner with clients, we decide which of the 5 of us is the best person to take the lead on that relationship, because just how we all work differently and have different styles and personalities that we can match up with our clients. So yeah, from the startup side, just finding someone that you feel will represent you well in the market, and who you feel is just the right partner for you, specifically if you have that option maybe to work with different people in the company.
Yeah, sure. I agree. And making sure they're asking critical questions from the start, that would actually help them understand you as a business, to know who would be a good fit and who wouldn't, from a skills standpoint, but obviously culture fit standpoint and all of those things. Otherwise, they're just going to send you the same candidates they'll send everybody. So agreed. All right, well, I want to make sure that we leave time to talk about selection, because I think, it's super easy in a way to post a job out there and to get people to apply. But if you have a process that's broken or not set up to, first of all, keep people engaged, but second of all, make sure you're identifying in the best way possible who's a good fit and who you should hire, then everything was kind of a waste of time anyway, right? And this is where, again, I don't see, in my experience, a lot of the clients I work with, they don't put a lot of purposeful effort here. They just kind of, I think someone mentioned previously, like there's no definition up front of how many interviews there will be, how many stages, who's going to be in that process. So I guess whomever wants to start, who's had some more, I guess nightmarish experience with this than others, and what, the biggest lessons they've learned from experience or watching, their employers or their teams or their clients make these mistakes, what were those lessons, and what would you advise these startups to do to make sure they try to get that right?
Can I start real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll go to you, Sarah. I just saw you unmute at the same time. But I was gonna say one of the biggest lessons I've learned being in-house and now with my clients in the agency world is, if you interview one great person the first time, hire them, select them. Yeah, there's still so much, well, let me see what else is out there, or I need to compare. And that's just such an outdated way of thinking. So I know I mentioned it before, but just how can we feel more empowered to make that decision right away? So the biggest lesson is then that person has multiple other offers on the table. So yeah.
Good point. Yes. Sarah, did you have something that you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, I would just say, I think as a team that you're hiring someone to really be involved, to understand what the questions you're going to ask and what you really need for the role. And I think it's a two-way street. You're trying to evaluate them, but also you want to give them something that they're running to from where they are, not just running away from something. So being able to showcase, what you're looking for, and listening and seeing how attached they feel to what you're sharing, and get examples from them to see that alignment, which I think if you can do that early, in those first questions, then you can get to a hiring decision quickly, to Claire's point. I think is really critical.
Yeah, being as scientific as you can about the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I see you raising your hand up there.
I have somewhat different thoughts on the matter. So one of the things that I find worry me, and I've been on interviewing panels where I've interviewed people that came into. So from that standpoint, it's just, I find if we optimize too heavily, we miss out on, it's what we were optimizing on, like find the perfect question, find the perfect candidate. And I don't know how many people know the 10x engineer trope outside of my immediate bubble. No, it's the overachiever that's like, why have a team of 10 engineers when you can find one? And it's just, but it's really toxic too, because you have a very isolating culture. You're going to pass up on dozens of very qualified candidates trying to find the so-called unicorn overachiever.
Sure.
And so my thought on the matter is if you, there's got to be balance. There's got to be a certain amount of like social emotional business intelligence going into this. You're going to spend all of your time top loading and like you're going to have interview loops that go on for you as a company for months. I've seen people trying to fill roles for 3 and 6 months at a time, especially as you get more senior. And it's like, I do wonder if they had maybe focused a little less on optimizing for that one perfect unicorn and took some of the beautiful thoroughbreds or whatever. I'm just trying to make this metaphor work at this point. Like,
It's working. Keep going.
but like when you take one of those and your company now functions. So how much is the time you're sinking into it worth it to you to have a role that's unfilled, distributing those work under people that might be underpowered now because maybe you don't have enough people on the team to do all the work and et cetera, et cetera. Like this has downstream implications to have a bunch of
Right.
open job recs. Just, that's my main take on it. And so
No, totally agree. And then maybe
that's off
something-
soapbox.
like, I think then that's going back to the drawing board and saying like, well, maybe something was broken about this posting we put together, job description or whatever, where we required this degree and this experience, like you kind of mentioned before, and reassessing that. Yeah. Go ahead, Joel.
That's a great point because you could almost take what it cost the company to do all those interviews. You could see who was in the interviews. You can get an idea of their salaries. Okay, you spent this amount of money, right? Just interviewing. Can you have optimized, better if you gave that other candidate a chance? So totally great point. And one thing I wanted to piggyback on that was we've seen clients use the interview process as a way to figure out what they're looking for in a position. So, that should be defined first. Don't spend all that time, going through the interview to the interview process, and then, as a way to define what you're looking for. So I've seen that happen many times.
I agree. I've seen it happen a million times.
I just thought,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No, and I just find too, like if you're going to have multiple people interviewing, make sure you're not like talking about the same topics over and over again. So, oftentimes, our individuals interviewing aren't scripted by any means, but it's like, who's really talking about like how you get trained? Who's talking about, more of the culture or the technical side of it. So you balance out the discussion. So you walk out with as much information as possible. I also think, where you can, to have a couple of touch points with the candidate without it prolonging the process. So how their interactions are consistent. Because I've also seen that when a candidate will be outstanding with me because they know I'm a director of HR, but then I put them with more of a peer and then they let kind of, the real version of them out, and it impacts the hiring decision significantly, good or a go or a not on that front. So I think thinking through like who's involved, why is that important, and what input might you be able to get as, keeping the process moving, but valuable input to make a good hiring decision.
Yeah, and just making sure they're sharing information too, for sure.
Mhm.
All right, a couple more quick ones to get through here, not to cut anybody off, but so I'm a big believer that a lot of this is broken down by just people not asking the right questions or not asking questions the right way that actually gets information, right? There's a lot of yes or no questions or leading questions, and you really want to discover who somebody is, and there's a piece on my website about that too if you're looking for tips. But really quick, what is each of your favorite go-to questions to get the most, valuable information in an interview? So we'll start with you, Claire.
I just like to go with what's a project you worked on that you're most proud of and why.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Says a lot. Sarah?
So many, but I would probably say something, if I don't go the team angle like Claire, it's, when they've gone the extra mile and why, or when they've, that will show some level of adaptability and flexibility in the way that they work.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Joel?
I don't think I have one specific one, right, that gets to it, but to your point, it's open, a lot of open-ended questions and avoiding the yes and no's, and it's very conversational, open-ended, and you learn a lot, by letting people speak and listening. So I think most interviewing is just should be listening.
Yeah, I totally agree. People talk way too much. You should be talking like maybe 20% of the time, probably less. The candidate should be doing all the talking, even if that means awkward silent pauses that force them to talk. All
That's
right.
when the stuff comes out. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a quote out there. I think Harry Neal said it during a Sabres game a long time ago. I always remember about rookies. You never know what you're going to get till you put them in hot water, kind of like tea. So I always think of that. Quinn, all right. What's your question?
I kind of have a similar, I don't have like a question that I target so much as I kind of view the interview window as a really high stress process for the candidate. So very likely they're not their A game anyway. So I try and target questions that have them start talking about things that would bring out their confidence and what I might expect to see them functioning on a day-to-day and not like in this very siloed high stress environment.
Sure.
And also to earlier points, open-ended questions and give them an opportunity to talk at me about that.
Absolutely. All right, final question. I think it's something super important to hit on here. And Quinn, this is going to go to you to start. But we talked a lot about, what the startup can do, what the employer can do. But right now, more than ever, candidate experience and engagement in the process is important because you are fighting for those candidates. And, as we talked about, having way too many steps and things is just going to see people disengage and pop out and just go somewhere else. So Quinn, in your experience, what are you seeing as the biggest source of disengagement in your company's processes, or just from the feedback that you're hearing? And what would you recommend companies do to kind of address some of those common missteps?
All of them center around investment, right? So I actually, because of all of gestures vaguely everything, I wrote up a thing for my company on my thoughts on employee retention and just passed it along to whomever cared to read it. But when you have people who are moving in a lot of mobility and you're trying to address that, you start to notice very quickly that the incentives don't align. Misaligned incentives are the death of everything. So you have an employer that's incentivized to retain, and you have a job market that is incentivized to hypercompete, right? So when we talk about employee experience, you want to keep that experience. And if you invest in the employee, then the employee doesn't have to go through the stress of multiple interviews and all sorts of implications for them. But if you don't compensate them for that, and compensate them at the rate that someone else is willing to poach them from you, they're still incentivized to leave you because you have now invested in their education, but maybe not their salary. And there's a whole rabbit hole that I believe exists here about just things that employers can do to really help employees be invested in. Because the other thing I think ties into this myth is about, I call the myth of employee experience, because I think that a lot more people are qualified to do a much greater percentage of the jobs on the market than we give the market credit for. And so we kind of treat people that have to be the perfect fit like they're magic. But realistically, if we just created a better environment, we could be hiring more people, and maybe hiring would be less hard. Interview loops wouldn't go on as long, and et cetera. So that's, again, something that can help with candidate experience.
Sure.
Tighten up interview loops, make sure you're focusing on things that actually matter. Making sure that you have employee motion movement, so that, again, per earlier conversation, if you know what types of roles overlap in skill set, or if I say to my manager, oh, I would like to be a manager too someday or whatever, and actually being coached in that instead of having to like leave and all sorts of other things that can really help, I think, the company, because then the company is getting a more and more and more experienced employee.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it again all ties into different types of investment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Don't just focus on the experience of the candidates, make sure that you're remembering your existing employees so they don't become someone else's candidates. Sure.
Right. That's kind of where I'm driving with all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Claire, I think you again are kind of on a unique perspective, being on both sides of the equation, I think, and coaching people and looking for jobs, and also, and the recruiting side. So what are some of the things that you're seeing that are the biggest, really points of self-destruction for companies as they're recruiting?
Yeah, I'll keep it short because I love what Quinn had to say, but I'm sure we've all seen that meme going around that says it's 2021 hiring managers, you're the candidates now, not the other way around. And I just love it because I feel like now's a good time for just back to basics, the importance of basics, the amount of clients I still have that are late, that have limited, interview windows, that ask really generic questions. Again, we covered that the recruiter already asked, so it's not the best impression that they've read the candidate's materials, ahead of time. So I think now is just a really good time to get those things ironed out.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. Anyone else want to contribute anything that they have seen? or maybe just things you've had to modify, this year with the changes that have occurred?
One thing, oh, I'm sorry, Sarah, you're gonna.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, one thing I was gonna say was, yeah, just being very upfront with what the process is gonna be, from the beginning with the candidates, so they know whether right to go on the journey or not. And then, one thing that I think has changed for the better is used to be to like have a candidate interview. It used to be like 2 years ago, candidate would have to take time off of work, right? Go get dressed up, go in or fly in or whatever. Now, and there was some doing remote beforehand, it was fine, but now remote interviews are widely acceptable and widely happen for first or second rounds, which has made it so much easier, right? You can use that to big advantage of what it used to be, not even a year and a half, 2 years ago. So it's I think a positive that's coming out of this. Oops.
I think you're still
You're on mute there.
Emily.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the accessibility of that for people to join the process and probably move through it more quickly is a great benefit as well. And Sarah, do you want to end us with your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just add that, I've seen missteps with some competition on candidates where their actions are speaking louder than their words. So that would be my advice, is that if you talk about your environment being flexible, make sure that plays out in how you treat that candidate, because they're looking at that, and vice versa when you're talking to them, and how, what do you need in your day-to-day from them, and how are they aligning as a candidate to that, and just how they interact with you and their communication, does that fit? Because all of those little pieces of information are great nuggets to try your best to have a good fit across the board.
Yeah, for sure. I think, being mindful of your actions and not just what you say or your advertising is super important, because people are probably going to take more from that.
Absolutely.
Well, we're getting just past 5:30 here, so wanted to make sure that we leave some time for questions out there. So I think now is the time. But thank you everyone for joining us, Joel and Sarah and Quinn and Claire. It was an awesome discussion. I wish we had more time. I feel like we could go on for hours. It's such a robust topic for sure. So we'll open the floor to questions. If you guys want to unmute yourself, you can ask questions, or you can put it in the chat and we can receive them that way. But please, you have a very captive, panel of people here to answer. We'll give a couple minutes for that. While those are coming in, what do you guys think what of these changes and trends will be permanent, basically, for the foreseeable future?
We're definitely not going back to what it was. So there's going to be a lot of changes. And the interviewing, right? Remote work, hybrid, flexibility, all that. So I don't think we're going back. So I think we're going to have a lot of change.
Yeah, I think video interviews were kind of like a weird occurrence, and I think those are going to probably stick forever.
Yeah.
No, I never thought.
And I think that candidates are really trying to understand more of the lifestyle than ever. It used to come up, but it was like kind of after maybe the offer, or even after they accepted. And I feel like those are a lot more leading questions that candidates are coming up with to really understand not just the technical side of what they're, going to be engaged in, but what the environment is, the who, how flexible they are, and what autonomy will they have in the role, how will they really know, are they, valued and able to grow? So I think you're getting more of those questions up front, because it's really the candidate has the upper hand in many ways.
Yeah, like the meme that Claire talked about, yeah.
And kind of relevantly to that, I think that people are, especially after the experience of the past year and a half, they're going to be more focused on making sure that they can maintain, I'm going to use the words work-life balance somewhat tentatively, because it got so egregiously, everything bled into each other. People talking about like perceptions of time being off because you don't have the normal cues of what different days are. So like when you have people who are looking to interview and change jobs at companies, they probably want to know how time boxed that is. It the type of job where they're expected to do after hours, and IT on call is common, things like that. And they just want to know how much lead they have to, they'll be expected to compensate for, and if they're okay with that.
Right. Yeah, I think people are scarred from that from the last 2 years for sure.
I think another positive change coming out of this is like companies are becoming a little bit more human. You know, not every company, but some. We've all like have peeked into our living rooms now, right? And have had maybe kids or animals, whatever, just,
Yeah.
you know, the craziness of life. And I think a little bit, you know,
Empathy.
yeah, there's been a little bit more of that. So that's a positive.
I think it's naturally occurring and then it's being forced, companies are
Yeah.
likely being forced to have it in other situations, but
Yeah,
regardless.
right. If they don't want to be, they're going to be forced to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Well, thanks guys. We'll definitely get this recording out there. It looks like there's no questions. Claire, did you have anything you wanted to add before we go?
Oh, thank you.
All right, we'll get the recording out there and we, want to share it in your networks. I'm sure they'll get a lot of watches after the event here, but thanks so much for joining tonight. I really appreciate it.
yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.